Welcome back to another episode of Around the World. This is episode 14 as we continue to move along this NBA season. We had a very busy weekend of NBA games. I cannot lie. We had more games, more good games than I think I would have expected. Usually, sometimes these, 3 day gaps with Friday, Saturday, Sunday can actually have a lot less content to come over here and talk about, but we actually do have quite a bit to discuss. Starting out, as always, with the community question, which for this week is something I will talk about more later in the video. But the question is, who do you think are going to be the teams left out in the West? That was one of the big topics going into the season, right? We had so many teams out West that looked like they were going to be good, and it just became a debate of some of these people are going to have to miss the play-in, miss the playoffs. And when me and my friends did our predictions on enjoypredictions.com and made, the list of 15, it was really cool to see all the different teams that people had missing. Some people had the Spurs, some people had the Kings, some people had, I think, the Pelicans at some point, which actually is looking very good now because of all the injuries they've had. So it just has varied so much. And I think it's looking like that is absolutely going to come true. There are going to be some teams that are unexpected that are going to miss. I think the ones that are expected so far are obviously the Jazz and the Blazers. I don't think anybody would see them going. And then the Pelicans, just based on how injured they are. But we've got some teams that definitely could be on that brink of will they be able to hold on to where they are right now? Or is what we're seeing right now with them being at the back half actually true to where they're going to be, and are they going to stay there? Like I said, we'll get more into it as we get into some of these teams that are on that brink or who I do think may fall on throughout the video. So, as always, as long as the in-season tournament is going on, we open up with the in-season tournament recap for the week. This was on Friday. We had a very fun slate of games. We had Dallas beating Denver, Chicago beating Atlanta, Houston beating Portland, the Clippers beating Sacramento, Milwaukee beating Indiana, Golden State beating the Pelicans, Boston beating Washington, and Philadelphia beating Brooklyn. A few of the games I want to talk about, we have 4 that we will get into. First up is Golden State against New Orleans. Definitely not the finest game for the Golden State Warriors, obviously, but again, they just find ways to get it done. And as we speak, they're tied with the Thunder for that number 1 record out in the Western Conference. Those two teams are a game ahead of the next closest team in the Rockets, who are 12-6. So it's a very, very impressive start for this Warriors team. I cannot keep I can't talk about it anymore, man. Like, it's really, really impressive. I expected them to be one of those teams that were on the brink when you talk about teams that may miss out on the play-in out west, and they have proven me wrong completely. Obviously the Western Conference is so stacked that a 3-4 game losing streak, you kind of watch yourself tumble down the same way in the East. A 3-game winning streak can watch yourself climb up so much. The Warriors just really shocked me, and I've said it many times. Their offseason to me was so underrated. Initially, I was like, meh, but then when you really think about it and you go, they replaced Klay Thompson with better Klay Thompson and Buddy Hield, and my God, has Buddy Hield been that. Draymond Green isn't being suspended for 25 games like he was last year. He was such a valuable piece, and they were above 500 with him last year. They're showing that now. He's been phenomenal defensively. The team has been phenomenal defensively. It's just been a really, really nice start for the Warriors. And I think the most important part for them, I don't believe they're going to stay the 1 seed, but it is so important that you get off to a hot start in such a stacked Western Conference, so that, like we talked about, if they do happen to take, that 3-4 game losing streak, they have the cushion where instead of going from 7 to 10 or 11, they're now going from 1 to 3 or 4 with that losing streak. So phenomenal start for the Warriors. There's not much more to say than that. They really, really have been great. Next team I want to get onto. Actually, no, we'll stay out west. We'll do the next Western Conference one, because then we have 2 Eastern Conference teams I would like to talk about. One of them very briefly, because we'll talk about them more later. The big game, though, and I think probably the best game of the night on that day, was Dallas against Denver. Very close game. Obviously, no Luka. I haven't heard any word actually about when he's going to come back yet. I only heard about that initial timetable, which I think was today, that he was going to be reevaluated. So maybe I'll see that on Twitter later on today. But Dallas gets to win over Denver. Great, great game from PJ Washington. But the biggest thing for me wasn't necessarily Denver losing or Dallas winning or anything. It was just that I can't see a world this year, and especially after Jokic coming back from missing 3 or 4 games, where he's not the MVP. I can admit when I'm wrong, and I said that Jokic is going to have a good year but it just wouldn't be able to match up and that this was going to be Luka's year, I can't deny I'm looking as wrong as ever. Let's look at the stats because Jokic has been absolutely phenomenal this year. I believe he's putting up career highs in like many, many stats. I mean, holy shit, man. 30 points, 14 boards, 11 assists. That is what he is putting up right now through 12 games of him playing on the season. Of course, they have a little bit more games. He rarely ever gets hurt, so it's very likely he's going to play approximately 70 games, knock on wood, if he doesn't get injured. The 3-point percentage is the biggest thing for me. Obviously, very small sample size. He has never shot above 40 in his career. Nikola Jokic is shooting 56% from 3 this year. This is ridiculous. And not only is he shooting 56%, he is taking the most volume he has taken in his entire career with 4 threes a game. He is going to an MVP. I'm going to say it right now. I'm changing my prediction. It was Luka, and obviously I'm going to stick with Luka when I go back and look at my predictions later on in the year, but it is going to be Nikola Jokic. There is nobody who can stop this man. Good teams, bad teams. And I think the biggest thing is because Denver is no longer as dominant as they were. They're not going out and winning by 30 every single night. They're still going to be up there in the Western Conference. Because they're not as dominant, Jokic is done, just having nights off against bad teams, getting 9 points, 12 assists, 10 boards. He's done with that. We saw him against the Nets and the Raptors all the way at the beginning of the season, putting up 40-point games. And it's ridiculous. This is one of the greatest offensive peaks we have ever seen. He's putting up, Westbrook averaged a triple-double. If I'm not mistaken, he's putting up more points, rebounds, and assists than Russell Westbrook did in his prime MVP season. Absolutely insane. Jokic is going to an MVP, and I don't think there's a single person in the league that is going to be able to get even close to the numbers he's going to have. Absolutely incredible from him. Now, let's move back east for the first, or not move back, we'll move east for the first time today. The two talking points, I think we'll get into one more than the other because the other one I do talk about a little bit more. It's Tyrese Halliburton and then also the Milwaukee Bucks. So they played in that in-season tournament game on Friday. Milwaukee got a win, which quick shout out to Milwaukee. They're moving up the conference. That's the team we'll talk about later. But the main thing I want to talk about is Tyrese Halliburton. Of course, been a very slow start to the season for him. I will go ahead and pull up the stats here to make sure I'm not spewing out anything that would be wrong about Tyrese Halliburton's start so far this season. But it certainly has not been good. You look at where he was the last 2 seasons, 20 points back-to-back years, 10 assists back-to-back years. And this year, points are down by 5, averaging 15, and assists are down by 2, averaging 8.5 currently. So it really has not been a phenomenal start for him. The 3-point percentage is nearly under 30. He's shooting 30.7% from 3. His 2-point efficiency is down as well. And I think the biggest problem with all of it is that the the Pacers are 7-10. That is tough. Coming off an Eastern Conference Finals in a really weak Eastern Conference where you figure Halliburton had a great season, he's at least going to be the same. If he's not better, because it is very difficult for players to have great seasons and then improve. That is what the greats do. Not that Tyrese Halliburton won't be a great, but it is very difficult to do that. And so far, he has not. He has definitely not even stayed remotely close to where he was last year, and it really is impacting the Pacers. That extra, if you think about it, just the extra 5 points and the extra 2 assists from him is almost 10 points a game that this Pacers team is missing out on. Not to mention the inefficiencies. We could have even more. If his efficiency is a little better, he could have even more. He could be more like 22 points per game if his efficiency was better rather than 20. But I think the biggest thing about this is if anybody has watched the Pacers and kind of taken a deep dive on cleaning the glass and all that sort of stuff, you will notice the Pacers are significantly down in pace. And I will say this is a common theme for a lot of young teams that are progressing into becoming really good teams come playoff time. If you look at the trends, all the bad teams in the NBA, all the young teams in the NBA play really, really fast. And all the good teams, with the exception of pretty much the Celtics, who they don't play ridiculously fast, if I'm not mistaken. They just shoot a lot of threes. But a lot of the better teams have a little bit of a slower pace. They're just more efficient. And the Pacers, I believe, decided this offseason to try to change their identity. They wanted to get away from the run and gun fast pace a little bit. They still play fast pace. And you can trace that all the way back to when they traded for Pascal Siakam. When they got Pascal Siakam, the pace dipped. Naturally, Obi Toppin isn't on the court as much and all that sort of stuff. Siakam isn't necessarily a super run and gun type of guy, at least anymore in his career. So naturally the pace is going to slow down, and that has really affected Tyrese Halliburton. At least that's how I see it. He loves to play fast. Now the efficiency is something like just completely its own thing, but the assist numbers you can definitely attribute to that slower pace of play. I still think the Pacers are going to be fine. Similar to what I said with the Bucks the last few weeks. Yes, I want the Bucks to fire Doc Rivers. Yes, I think the Bucks are going to be fine. They're probably going to win a playoff this series this year. All that sort of stuff. And I could say a similar story about the Pacers. They're probably going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to have a competitive playoff series, maybe make it to the second round. But I want to see some of these teams out east do what the Cavs, Celtics, and even the Magic have done this year without Paulo and really take that next step and make that jump. Because that is the problem. All these East teams have these really great seasons. You think back to even Philly in 2018, 2019, 2020, all the way up to 2021 with Ben Simmons. You think to the Hawks from a few years ago, making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. You think to the Bucks before they won the championship, and even after the championship, they just hit these peaks, and they just can't get back there. And the Celtics have really been the only team to prove that they can get back there. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they come back, they win and go to the finals, lose in the finals, then they go back and they win the finals. That is one of the only teams that has really proven they can come back time and time again and be consistent, and a lot of teams out east don't have that. So I'm hoping for the Pacers. This last year was not a one season, one playoff run fluke, because I really do think they have the talent to be good for the next 4 to 5 years. Maybe I'm being a little too ambitious with the 4 or 5 number, but definitely the next 2 to 3 seasons, there is no reason where they shouldn't be a top 6, 7 seed, making it into the playoffs and giving themselves competitive series year in and year out. That's it for the Pacers, though. As for the Bucks, like I said, we'll talk about them a little bit later because they did have another game that I do want to discuss. We move out of the in-season tournament with that. We move on to Saturday, where we have a topic I want to talk about as well here, which is just the competitiveness of the NBA. We talked a little bit, pretty much in every episode, about how the East is so weak and the West is so good. That being said, I really have to say, this is the most I have ever seen the NBA in an anybody can win any game type of league. The Jazz upset the Knicks. The Blazers beat the Rockets after just getting beat by like 20 or 30 the day before in the in-season tournament. The NFL constantly gets talked about as the place where, any given Sunday, anybody can win. The NBA is slowly becoming that league, and I think that is a product of the new CBA with trying to not have these super teams anymore, or if they do have super teams, they have significant, issues with them. Like they can't pick up players that get bought out. They lose their draft pick, or their draft pick goes all the way to 30th, no matter where they finish, all that sort of stuff. And the NBA really has become a lot more even. The East just happens to be a lot more even teams that are a little bit worse than out West, whereas the West happens to be a lot more really good teams who are also still even. So you're seeing these games where it's just like, the Rockets have been really good all season long. They're 3 out West right now, and they lose to the Blazers. We saw the Wolves lose to the Blazers twice in a row, and the Raptors. We've seen the Mavericks lose to the Jazz. We now see the Knicks lose to the Jazz. It's just been a common theme all season long. And overall, I think it really is a good thing for the NBA. And it's going to make it way more exciting because you're going to have years where you look at the Rockets, who going in, I predicted them to finish, I think, like 11th or 12th this year. A lot of my friends that I did the predictions with predicted them to also finish outside of the play-in or maybe in the play-in. And here they are at the 3 seed, but yet they can still lose to a team that we all thought was going to be at the bottom of the conference. And that's been a theme in both conferences. And I think the main point of it is not necessarily the fun of the regular season, although it will make the regular season more fun with all these close records. It's the playoff series. We are going to see, I think, a lot of playoff series that are very close. You think back to the last couple of years, there's been jokes made about, the closest sweep of all time, specifically last year with the Pacers and the Celtics. That is legitimately becoming a reality. The teams are so good that they can play close every single night that you will have sweeps that don't feel like a sweep. Now, obviously, there's ones like the Thunder against the Pelicans last year. They whooped on them. It wasn't even close. But you have the Pacers-Celtics sweep. You have even the Suns-Wolves sweep. The Suns got blown out, I think, in one game. But other than that, the Wolves played them close, or the Suns played the Wolves close pretty much every single game. And it's going to foster a lot of fun playoff series, a lot of more upsets in the playoffs, I think. And just overall, it's going to generate more star power in the NBA, having all these different teams rather than seeing the same 3, 4, 5 teams in the conference finals every single year. And it's really cool. Speaking of new stars coming into the league, Franz Wagner. He has been steadily progressing for the last few years, and he is now having an all-star season, a career year for him. Seriously, so impressive. Let's look at the exact stats, because again, I don't want to mix anything up here. On the year, again, could be somewhat contributed to Paula being out, not even somewhat, definitely contributed to Paula being out and having more of a role. 23.5 points, 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 35% from 3, which I believe is a career high, if I'm not mistaken. Very close to a career high. But this is 4th season in the NBA. He's just 23 years old, and he's starting to blossom. I really do think he's going to be an all-star this year. If you take out those first few games where Paula was there and kind of see these last, 10, 15 game sample size, it's really been phenomenal stuff. He's played, I believe, every single game so far this season. He has taken now a 4-point jump in points per game, also a jump in rebounds, also a jump in assists. Specifically, the playmaking has been really impressive from him. And he's going to be a candidate for MIP that I really didn't see coming, to be completely honest. I did not see him coming as a candidate for MIP. We talked about how there's good players that get a bigger role that win MIP. And I was thinking of guys like Cade Cunningham, guys like Victor Wembanyama. I never saw Franz coming, so really phenomenal season for him. I feel like it has to be shouted out, and it probably won't be the last time I shout him out. Two quick things to mention before we get into the Bucks again, who we talked about very, very briefly earlier. Back to kind of the anybody can win any given night. The Spurs upset the Warriors on Saturday as well. A great game for Victor Wembanyama. I think it was like a 25-9-7, something along the lines like that. Really, really good game from him, and honestly exciting start for the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously not incredible, but to have them be above 500 around teams like the Suns, the Mavericks, the Wolves, the Kings, that's the range you want to be in when you're early in a rebuild. Obviously, you're not expecting them to be as high as the Thunder, the Lakers are out there in the Western Conference, but it's really exciting for them to see a little bit of progress with so much still coming for them, and it's really, really cool. So great job for the Spurs, and just something I want to mention just because it's funny, the Nuggets continue to own the Lakers, absolutely bullied them on Saturday night. Another insane performance from Jokic, and somehow Jokic is the best Anthony Davis stopper in the league. I believe Aaron Gordon does guard him sometimes, but for some reason Anthony Davis just can't do much against the Nuggets. He will have games here and there, but I seriously don't know there's some fucking voodoo magic that happens between the Nuggets and Lakers, because even the stats of like Michael Porter Jr. a couple games before, the 3 games before versus his game against the Lakers, it's absolutely ridiculous. So just very funny. I wanted to mention that. But let's get into the Bucks. We've talked about them last 2 episodes, going from like pretty much last in the East, and I go, they got a little hot, won 2 games, now they're back in 10th or whatever it was, and now they win 2 more games this over the course of this weekend, and they're 8-9. LaMelo Ball drops 50 on them. It's not enough, although hilarious performance from LaMelo Ball. I believe he took like 38 shots in that game, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But the Bucks get it done 2 games in a row against the Pacers and against the Hornets, and here they are at 8-9. Let me double check their schedule for who they play, because I talked about how their start of the season actually was a little more difficult than I think people gave them credit for. They played the Celtics, I believe, twice early on in the season. They also played the Knicks, and they also played the Cavs twice. Like, we hated on the Bucks so much. They played the Cavs twice, the Celtics twice, and the Knicks, and the Rockets, who they did beat earlier this week. This is a difficult start to the season. I can't blame them at all, to be honest, for being around 500. But now you look at their schedule, they still have the Cavs again, of course, because they're in division with them, and also have the Celtics a couple more times this season. But now we got Heat, Wizards, Pistons, Hawks before we play the Celtics, and then even then it's Nets, then Cavs, then Wizards, Bulls, Nets, Bulls again, Pacers again, Nets again, Blazers, Raptors, Spurs. I mean, we're talking about a Bucks team that in, mid-December, we could be going from talking about them as disappointment, bad start to the season, slow start to the season, to legitimately being the 3 or 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. If they realistically could win each of the next 4 games before they play the Celtics, the Heat, the Wizards, the Pistons, and the Hawks, they could go 4-0 there. That puts them at 12-9, nearly tied with what the Magic are right now, who I believe are the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, they're the 3 seed. Then they see the Celtics, who I would not gonna lie, I would expect the Celtics to win that game, but the Bucks have played the Celtics competitively at least one of the games, if I'm not mistaken. I think both. Definitely, they played them close the second time where they had the lead. Yeah, they only lost by 6. So this Bucks team, I think, is being a little bit overlooked right now. If I'm being completely honest, Giannis is putting up some phenomenal numbers. A lot of 40-point games, high 30-point games, and obviously the 59-point game a few weeks ago. So really impressive stuff from him, and I think it won't be too long till the Bucks are right back where we expected them to be, in that top of the Eastern Conference, next to teams like the Knicks, the Celtics, the Cavs, the Magic, where we expected them to be. Now we move on to our last few topics of the day, which is just what happened on Sunday. I want to briefly talk about Celtics Wolves. As a Wolves fan, definitely disappointed in this game, but the reason I'm disappointed is not that we lost to the Celtics, because I was expecting that going into the day. It frustrates me as a Wolves fan for years having to watch us play to our competition every single night. If we're playing a good team, you bet we're close to them. If we're playing a bad team, also going to be close with them. And sometimes it's going to cost us games. We rarely blow out teams, and that was one of the biggest things last year. If we saw, the Blazers or whatever last year, it wasn't close. We were blowing them out of the water. We didn't even give them a chance. And that's the problem we have this year, is we don't do that. And with the Wolves, and I talked about this last week, if you win 3 of those 4 games against the Raptors, the 2 against the Blazers, and the 1 against the Heat that we threw away at the end of the game, if you win 3 of those 4, this team is 11-7 right now. 11-7, and that would put you at the 5 seed, right, with the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets right now. And instead, they're 11 and out. So it's just frustrating to have us play the competition. I will say, though, very good signs from the Wolves in that game, and they almost, were able to pull it out. Naz Reid misses by, literally an inch to the left of the rim. It's just a tough loss, but it's exciting for me because we finally did play good against a good team and finally played well, more specifically. But I really would hope to see that now against some of the worse off teams where it's like we need to take advantage of these games. One other thing I want to talk about with the Wolves, Rob Dillingham. He has positives and negatives. Want to give him a shout out. Last night's game, or yesterday afternoon's game against the Celtics, was his best game of the season. Career high, I believe, 14 points or 15 points. And some, impressive shots, some impressive takes. Decisions looked pretty good. And I believe he led the bench in scoring on the night. So really impressive performance from Rob Dillingham. I will say, the one negative for him, he did have a positive plus-minus this game, but he, over the course of some of these games, has had negative plus-minuses. And the biggest reason why is because he gets targeted on defense so often. This was getting talked about all throughout the draft process, is the size. It's not necessarily being short. There are plenty of short guards in the league who can do fine defensively. The problem is he needs to build a frame. He really is. He just looks small out there on the court. And obviously he's, 6'1" or whatever it is. But he looks small and he looks skinny. And a lot of times they're able to switch, or even Derek White got a wide open 3 yesterday because Rob switches on, or maybe it wasn't Derek White, it might have been Tatum. Rob Dillingham switches on, and the plan for us is Rob can't stay on bigger guys. We got to switch back. So he goes to switch back, miscommunication, Tatum gets a wide open 3. So he really needs to build up a bigger frame, and I think he definitely can and definitely will over the course of the next year or so as we go into next season. But a very, very positive sign for him to see. I think for us to see for him, and I think we're going to see a lot more minutes for him now, which is what a lot of Wolves fans have been talking about for the last few weeks. 2 more things to talk about. We go back to that conversation about teams that can miss out west. The Kings lose to the Nets and have their fans absolutely pissed off on Twitter from what I've seen. A lot of angry fans. And they could be that team that's going to be the one to miss out. I left out, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Spurs, the Rockets, and the Clippers. That was who I left out. I don't think the Clippers were going to be able to be as good as they have been this season. But then again, they are on like a 4 or 5 game winning streak. If they go on a 3-game losing streak, they're right there with the Spurs and the Wolves and the Kings down there in the 10 to 12 range. But I picked those 3 teams to be the teams that were going to be left out, outside of obviously the Blazers and the Jazz. So it's just surprising. I thought the DeMar DeRozan move, while not being a great move for their playoff success hopes, I thought it was going to allow them to be good enough to make their way into the play-in again. And the way it's going this season it is not going to be. Sabonis has missed a couple games here and there, but I believe they won those games. They definitely won against the Jazz when Fox had like the 50 after the 60-point game the other night or whatever it was. They've almost beat the Wolves 2 times, so they are right there on being, like I said, with the Wolves being 11-7, they're right there on being similar story around 11-7. But they do look like they might be the team that misses out. And last year was a big step back after being the 3 seed, although I do think it was definitely a little bit of a fluky 3 seed. They played really good, but I think we all kind of knew like they're not going to make a playoff run here. And that kind of trickled on into the next season where they definitely weren't as good last year. And they look even worse so far this year. And I think it's less of them being bad and more so the West is so good that they don't have the depth or just the team to match up with some of these top teams out in the Western Conference. Obviously, they have not been healthy. Malik Monk has been out. Sabonis has missed games, like I said. So they haven't been fully healthy. And similar story to what I've talked about every single time, whether it's in either conference. A 3-game win streak, 4-game win streak, either way, with how close these conferences are, is legitimately 4 or 5 position switches. The next time I talk to you guys on Friday, the Kings could be like the 9 seed or 8 seed instead of the 12 seed. And be like 2 games ahead. And maybe instead it's the Wolves who are 8-10. Or, whatever it is. It's very likely that it's going to shift constantly throughout the season. But the most consistent piece so far for me has been the Kings are a true 500 team. And I'm going to expect them to be very, very close to 41-41 when we do get to the end of all 82 games. Final thing to talk about, just because I feel like I have to mention it every episode, the Sixers continue to fall. 3-13 on the season. I'll keep it nice and quick because I had the big rant about them last time. It's tough to see. You're getting to almost a point of no return. With the Sixers and with every other team that I've talked about, I keep saying win streak here and there, especially out east. You can move up a lot of positions. But you're getting to the point where, dude, if they go on a 10-game win streak, they're the 6th seed. And they're not going to go on a 10-game win streak. That's just not going to happen. And if they do, props to them. And I jinx myself. But I don't see a world in which they're going on an extreme win streak like the Bucks have 4 or 5 games. And the Bucks also caught themselves before they got to 3-13. I think the Sixers are going to make it out of the bottom 5. Do not get me wrong. I feel very, very confident in that. They're going to make it out of the bottom 5. They're going to be better than the Raptors, the Wizards, the Nets, the Bulls, the Pistons. Especially with the Nets likely trading people throughout this season. They just released that Cam Thomas is a trade target for the Bucks, and I believe Dorian Finney-Smith as well. So the Nets are going to get worse. The Bulls are going to get worse. The Pistons are going to get worse. Hell, the Hornets might even get worse. And I predicted them to finish 10th in the Eastern Conference this year. So there's definitely a world where the Sixers move up, but I think we're getting out of the range of where I predicted them. Oh, and a lot of people predicted them to be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. They are nearing the point where that's literally just not possible. And one of the biggest problems for it is I don't think they have had a super hard start to the schedule. We talked about the Bucks. It's like, I mean, they're injured and they're playing, the Celtics and the Cavs twice and the Knicks and stuff. But, I mean, the Sixers are playing hurt Grizzlies, hurt Magic. They have also played the Cavs and the Knicks, to be fair. They're playing the Hornets. They're playing the Raptors and losing. They're playing the Grizzlies again and losing. They're playing the Nets. And, I mean, that was one of the games that they won. And you're like, okay, there you go. And then they go play the Clippers the following night and get destroyed. So they have not taken advantage of games they should win. And when you look at the record for the next few weeks, they could be down here for a while. They play the Rockets on Wednesday. Definitely could be a win, but the Rockets are really, really good. If they're fully healthy, though, the Sixers are definitely on par with the Rockets. Pistons, Hornets, both winnable games. Then we go Magic twice, Bulls, Hornets, Cavs, Spurs, Celtics, and then you start to get in some of the easier games. Jazz, Blazers, Kings. But that's all the way in end of December. The Jazz Blazers thing I'm talking about, that is December 28th and December 30th. They play the Celtics on Christmas. They play the Cavs a few days before that. So there's a very likely chance that we're talking about the Sixers being 6-16. That's ridiculous. And that is a fourth of the way through the season with that record. I mean, that is what's the math? 22 games into the season? That is a fourth of the way through the NBA season. And you're going to be really far behind some of these teams that you will be at the point of no return if you don't pick it up now. They need, I would say, this Rockets game, not a must win. The Pistons and Hornets games, must win. Absolutely, you have to win those games. If they do not go 2-0 over the course of the following week, they only play one game in between now and the next time I talk to guys on Friday. But then they play on Saturday, and then they play on Tuesday in the NBA Cup. So we will know in a little over a week where the Sixers are going to be as a team. Because in a little over a week, they'll have played the Rockets, they'll play the Magic at least once, they'll play the Hornets and the Pistons. If they are not at least 2-2 in those 4 games, I might be ready to predict them where they're gonna finish, really low. What I did with Jokic earlier, how I predicted him to win MVP, I might be willing to make a crazy prediction on the Sixers that, dude, they're not gonna make the top 6, or they're not gonna make the playoffs at all. It's really frustrating. I'm wishing the best for them, but man, has it been a slow start. That was the last topic I want to talk about with today. I think next episode we will finally have a non-Sixer segment, unless something crazy happens or another players only meeting, whatever news comes out. But with them only playing one game, that should be the last I talk about them till at least next week. Once again, though, as always, if you guys made it to the end of the video, I really, really do appreciate it. If you're watching me over on YouTube, you can find all episodes over on Spotify. Search up Around the World, search up WarriorBoss30. You will find me. If you are listening over on Spotify, be sure to check out the YouTube. Look up WarriorBoss30, look up Around the World. You will find me. If you guys can support, it is really, really helpful to grow and build a community, both over on Spotify and on YouTube. So I would really, really appreciate that. If you want to watch clips, short form content, me talking about a little bit other topics here and there, be sure to check out the TikTok WarriorBoss30. Same as you see as the name of the YouTube channel and the name of the account that has the Around the World podcast over on Spotify. I will see you guys on Friday for another episode of Around the World. It'll be episode 15, and it could be a wild week in the NBA. We're also going to see some group stages gonna wrap up, and we'll see where these teams end up in the in-season tournament as we get real close to these teams heading to Vegas. And I'll see you guys then on Friday.